The most tender, juicy, delicious bite of barbecue you could ever hope for. A barky crust made of salt, pepper, and garlic, smoked on the offset for hours, and then confit in beef tallow for several more hours. Described by some as barbecue brisket concentrated down into a much smaller package. Today we're making one of the not so mainstream cuts of beef in barbecue known as beef cheeks. What was once considered a borderline throwaway cut of meat or something that you'd only use to grind up to make other stuff, beef cheeks have been becoming increasingly popular because sometime back some barbecue experts figured out the right way to cook them to turn these beef cheeks into an absolutely succulent and amazing bite of barbecue. And in somewhat recent times, barbecue beef cheeks have become even more popularized thanks to a barbecue joint in Austin, Texas called LeRoy Lewis. LeRoy Lewis has made a pretty big splash in the last few years, becoming, I believe, the first barbecue joint in the world to get a Michelin star, and they have a very particular way of making their barbecue beef cheeks that has kind of caught on, and a lot of people are trying it for themselves. And it's really not that crazy. We have to trim up the beef cheeks, season them with a heavy coating of our spice rub, then we're smoking them on the offset for a few hours, and then the final step, that's the slightly unusual part, is they're going to then be basically braised in liquid beef tallow for another several hours. This results in a super tender, super tasty, pretty fatty little disc of beef that is sort of reminiscent of a brisket, but is definitely its own thing and worth trying if you're really big into barbecue. All that being said, let me comment on the title of this video. As delicious and succulent and tender as these things are, my wife wants absolutely nothing to do with it. In fact, at the store that we even found these beef cheeks for sale, which is kind of a unusual thing up here in the north, she didn't even want me to put the package of these things in the shopping cart. She just doesn't like anything about it. She's a bit weirded out by the idea of them being cheeks. And in fact, today while I'm making these things, she's nowhere to be found. So whatever, she's missing out. I guess I think it's a little funny, but maybe we'll check in with her in a little while, see if we can't entice her to come give these things a try. And these are the beef cheeks that we're dealing with today. And when you buy a package of beef cheeks, or in my case, 2 packages of beef cheeks, you never know exactly what you're gonna be looking at till you get in there. You've always got the cheek, but you've always got just a huge mess of fat and other nonsense. Sometimes you get something like this where there's not even really a usable cheek in there. It's just mostly fat trimming from, one of the other pieces. But what that means is, of course, we have to start by trimming things pretty aggressively because we want to separate out the actual cheek from everything that's not a cheek. And in this case, that's pretty much this side over here and not most of this side over here. So it may be a little tricky to see on camera, but when you're holding one of these things, it seems it's pretty obvious. The majority of the meat is right here in this little package, and all of this excess is just fat. So I need to start by, trimming an awful lot of that away. And right there, that is not beef cheek. We can save this for the fat, a little bit of meat on there, we can do something else with it, but it's not gonna be part of our beef cheek cook today. And then after that, we're just gonna clean it up a little bit. Look for any, dangly bits that aren't gonna work very well in the smoker. Clean those edges up just a bit. Just think of this like a wee little brisket and how you'd want it to be a little more aerodynamic or whatever the right word is for it, so you don't get a lot of really burnt up edges. Some of this here, yeah, that's just some weird fat that I don't think is gonna render down or add a whole lot to this beef cheek, so I'm just gonna trim all that out of there. And as far as some of this little bit of silver skin on the back, I'm not too worried about that. This thing's gonna have a pretty long cook and half of it's gonna be in beef tallow, so all of that's gonna completely disintegrate before it's ever gonna be a problem for us. So that cheek's looking pretty decent to me. There's not really a whole lot of a fat cap on these at all, but there's some decent marbling in there that I think is gonna still produce a pretty good beef cheek. And of course, there's the aforementioned braising it in liquid beef fat for 4 hours, so I don't think we have to worry about it being dry. All right, so there's our 2 cheeks that we're gonna be making, and now we just have to get them seasoned up. And real quick, let's get our seasoning rub put together, and it's super simple. It's only 3 ingredients. We've of course got coarse ground black pepper, some kosher salt, and some granulated garlic. Yes, you could do just salt and pepper. Yes, you could add other things if you like, but for me, this is kind of my classic, well, almost authentic Texas style barbecue rub. So we're gonna go on with a nice heavy coating of our mix. Pretty much as much of this seasoning that'll stick to the meat. Of course, we're gonna get all the different sides and surfaces, make sure we don't leave any bare spots. We need lots of this seasoning so we can definitely build up a good solid bark before we get to the confit phase, because if there's anything loose when we start cooking it in that fat, we can end up losing some of that bark if it's not really nicely set up already. So I'm gonna leave these here for a couple minutes while I get the smoker ready, and we're gonna start this cook. Now we're outside and we gotta fire up the offset smoker. So I'm gonna fill my charcoal chimney up with some good lump hardwood charcoal. Get a couple little fire starters under it. Give it a few minutes. Once those coals are good and hot, I'll throw them into the firebox of the Oklahoma Joe. Add a couple little wood splits. Give this whole thing a little while to come up to temperature. And when our internal temp of the smoke chamber is at about 250 degrees, in go these seasoned beef cheeks. I'll position them pretty far away from the firebox because they are little and I don't want them to get too blasted with that heat. And as usual, I'll put a thermometer probe into one of those pieces of meat just so we can keep an eye on that internal temperature during this cook. Now I pretty much just have to leave them alone. Keep an eye on the fire, try to maintain a 250 degree temperature in the smoker for about the next 4 hours. That's sort of a low temperature for a small offset smoker like this, so I definitely need to keep an eye on it and make sure I'm keeping that fire exactly where it needs to be to maintain something close to that temperature. So I'm gonna close this thing up and we'll check back on it in a little while. So here we are, these cheeks have been on the smoker for about 2 hours. They're developing a really nice crust. They're looking good, they're smelling great. Just been maintaining my fire, trying to keep as close to that 250 degrees Fahrenheit as I can get. And now I'm just gonna let this keep smoking away for another hour or two. I wanna bring the internal temperature of these cheeks to somewhere between 165 and 180-ish. And once they reach that point, we're gonna pull them out, move on to the next step. All right, so our beef cheeks have been smoking away for a little over 3 hours, and our temperature is like 175 degrees internal, which is really about the time when we need to move on to the confit step. And for that, we're gonna be using some amazing Wagyu beef tallow. You can use any beef tallow you want. I like this stuff because I can buy it online, and it's pretty convenient, and it's really good. So we need to pretty much get some of this tallow melted down into a liquid form. So I'm just gonna scoop a bunch of it out, throw it into this little quarter-size hotel pan, and it doesn't really matter how much you put in as long as you put in enough to cover those cheeks once this is all melted. So I am gonna put a whole bunch of this stuff in here, and don't worry, when you're done with this, you can definitely run this tallow through a little filter or a mesh screen or something. Save it and reuse it. That's looking pretty good to me. I'm gonna stick this whole thing right in the smoker for just a little while to let this tallow melt down and liquefy. All right, cheeks are out of the smoker, tallow's melted, and now we're just dropping those cheeks into the tallow. And I'll go ahead and close up that little pan with some aluminum foil. And now this whole thing's just going back into the smoker. I'll mention that you could absolutely do this step in a oven or a toaster oven because you're not getting any more smoke on those cheeks at this point. So how you heat the tallow for the next 4 hours doesn't really matter. I've already got the smoker fired up, so I might as well use it, but an oven would work absolutely fine.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
So, I got these beef cheeks currently braising in the beef tallow in the smoker and wondered when you're gonna be back.
I already told want anything to do with your cow cheeks.
Are you sure? They're gonna be so delicious.
It doesn't matter, I don't want them.
But why not?
Because I don't want to eat anyone's face.
It's just the cheeks, though.
Yeah, that's their face. How many cow cheeks are you making?
Just 2.
So that's an entire face. I'm not eating faces.
You eat hot dogs. Do you have any idea how many pig snouts and horse lips and chicken beaks are probably in a standard American hot dog?
I'm hanging up now.
Love you. Well, I guess that's still not gonna happen. But that's okay. Her loss is my gain because that means there's more for me. Anyway, we're just gonna let those cheeks cook away in that tallow and we're gonna come back in a few hours. All right, we've been cooking in the beef tallow for a little more than 4 hours, and it's finally time to get in here and see how we're looking. And in full disclosure, I actually checked these just a little bit ago to see how they were coming along, and they were incredibly tender to the point where I'm almost worried about them falling apart just getting them out of this tallow. So as carefully as I can, I'm gonna pull them out of that little hotel pan, get them on a wire rack, and just let them sit for a little bit, drain off some of that excess tallow, maybe cool down just enough to actually eat it. Oh, wow, that is so soft. It's just like a little pillow. That's exactly what we're looking for. See, it looks like all of my seasoning and bark has stayed in place exactly where it's supposed to be. And these are just gonna sit here on this rack, maybe about 10 minutes, and then we're digging in and finally having a taste. As for this tallow, well, it certainly has a lot of bits of stuff floating around in it. But like I said earlier, I'm gonna run this through a fine metal strainer and it's gonna be good to use at least another time. All right, it is finally time to slice on in and give this a taste. That's looking really nice. We got a little smoke ring in there. This thing is so tender, it hardly wants to stay together. And I don't think that's something that I can be too upset about. Just look at that. This is going to utterly melt in my mouth when I go to eat this. I don't think I can delay this anymore. It's time to eat. All right, let's get a shot of just how tender and juicy this thing is. Just ridiculously fall apart. I can't even describe, but hopefully I don't need to because you can see that for yourself. That is just so tender and absolutely flavorful. It's like a concentrated little bite of brisket because there's more bark per, I don't know, surface area than you'd get on a slice of brisket. And honestly, these things are great because I don't need to cook an entire brisket, which is a pretty difficult cook, if I want to eat some just amazing barbecue beef. Though, when I am making brisket, I definitely have someone who's more than happy to share it with me. The beef cheeks, not quite so much. But again, that's perfectly okay. I'm gonna get a couple meals out of these couple of cheeks, and I'm gonna be a happy camper for it. If you're just getting into barbecue or you've been doing it for a while and you've never tried beef cheeks, it's really not a super hard cook. The trimming it all up might seem a little daunting, but just cut off everything that doesn't look like meat and cook the meat. Get yourself some beef tallow. If you can't find any in your store, I'll put a link to the stuff that I bought in the video description. And if you want to see a written out recipe for exactly how I made this, I'll put a link to that too in the video description. But it is super easy. Smoke it at 250 for about 4 hours. Put it in that melted beef tallow. Cook it at 250 for another 4 hours. And if you've got an oven that has a low warming setting on it of about 150 to 160, you can even stick it in there overnight if you want to hold it until the next day to eat it then. Anyway, I better end this here before I start getting the meat sweats on camera. If you like what you saw, be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including lots of future smoking and barbecue videos. And consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/Great Lakes Country. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm John, and this is Great Lakes Country.